Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Islanders, in which the Sharks have lost 4-1. So, a split season series against the Islanders, and if you watched yesterday's game against the Rangers and then watched this one against the Islanders, it was pretty disappointing. That Rangers game, obviously very exciting, pretty high skill, you could say, and it really could go either way. Here tonight, while you could argue that the Sharks were playing decently well, there just really wasn't much going on the ice. The Sharks couldn't generate too many chances. The Islanders did get a few more chances, I'd say, than the Sharks, and they were able to convert on many of those, or 3 of them to be exact. And in the end, the Sharks would sort of just end up losing this game. Really not much to say about that. The first period would start off and the Islanders would get the lead. That would come from Anders Lee to make it 1-0, but the Sharks would tie it up with a Dylan Gambrell goal to make it 1-1 at the end of the first period. Come second period, the Islanders would add on top of that with another Lee goal, as well as then Devon Toews scoring one. Eventually there will be an empty netter from Josh Bailey to make it 4-1 Islanders, and as I said, the Sharks would lose. First thing to talk about would be Martin Jones. He gets the start here tonight, and he had an okay game. He had a couple of nice saves in the third period to keep it just a 3-1 score, but prior to that, he was making the low-danger saves. There weren't any that were really on Jones, but you probably could have seen him make a couple of these saves. The first one, I certainly don't blame him, the first Lee one. The second Lee one, he could have potentially had, certainly, and then the one from Devon Toews, while this was a bad giveaway by Barclay Goodrow as he just loses the battle with Brock Nelson, who's able to take it away from him, it's also one that you could technically see Jones making the save on, but that's not to say that these were easy saves to make. In fact, both of that second Lee shot as well as the Devon Toews shot, both of them very nice top corner shots. So not easy saves, but Jones can't really say he had a fantastic game in that regard. Now, going into the following game on Tuesday against the Flyers, does the Jones get another start, or does Dell? Well, it's not only just to look at how the fact that Dell played on Saturday and Jones played tonight, because of the fact that tomorrow is the deadline, and with Dell being an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, it is technically possible that he gets traded. Of course, some of the big news is out of Carolina, who had both their starter and their backup get injured in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They had to call up that emergency backup. It made for some great story and all of that, especially since it was against the Leafs, one of the most talked about teams in the league, if not the most talked about team in the league. And so the Hurricanes are certainly looking for some goaltending help if any of those two players, or especially if both of them, are out long term, and Dell could be a pretty favorable option. So it's possible that by Tuesday Jones basically has to be the starter because there is no Dell. If both goalies are there, I would be surprised if Dell didn't get the start. Next, I'll talk about Radim Simek, as since he's reunited with Brent Burns, he's actually been playing rather well, which has been nice to see. As I pointed out the last time I talked about Simek, which was only a couple of games ago, I said that he had a pretty meh sophomore year, as he ended up getting demoted from that Brent Burns pairing because he just wasn't really playing consistent enough. But he has brought back his game to where we saw it was last season, and with him also being an unrestricted free agent this season, I suspect he certainly won't be moved at the deadline. He seems to be at least penciled in to be somewhat of a long-term play for the San Jose Sharks. At least I hope so, because Simek has been quite good, and the Sharks have looked good when he is in the lineup, and have looked a lot worse when he is not in the lineup. And so we'll see what the contract details for Simek work out to be when we come to that off season, but right now he's been playing rather well, and it does give hope for the following year. And finally, I'll talk about one of the Sharks' young players, because with the fact that the playoffs are certainly out of reach at this point, the Sharks were trailing 13 points out of a playoff spot at the start of the day, and this loss certainly doesn't help, so the playoffs are completely out of the question. It seems to be that they're mostly just looking towards some of these young players who are, you could say, auditioning for a bigger role on the team going into the following year. Players like Gambrell, like True, like Shellman, like Gregor, I guess you could say like Middleton, although I doubt there's a role open for him. But True has actually looked quite good in basically every game he has played. I've been rather impressed. He's been solid defensively, but he's also been making some things happen offensively. Now, it's not blowing anyone away. It's not like lighting up the score sheet, but he has been proving himself that once the Sharks are fully healthy this season, which won't happen, but next season when, Hertl is back and Couture will obviously be back then and Carlson will be back, that True could potentially have a spot in that bottom six, or at least be fighting for a spot in that bottom six, because of all these young players, maybe Shellman has certainly been there, although he hasn't been as apparent since he returned from injury. True has maybe been the most impressive of the bunch, but that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday. As I said, post-trade deadline will be very interesting to see which faces are still here and which are not. Possible movements come down to Thornton, maybe even Marlowe. It's possible LeBanc could be traded, although I would doubt that. Arundel, of course. Melker Karlsson is injured at the moment, so I don't know how likely it is for him to be moved either, but it's very possible that we're looking at a somewhat different Sharks team, if not a very different Sharks team come that game against the Flyers. When it comes to the Flyers, the Sharks did win the first meeting against them rather handedly, so we'll see if they can deal with them again. Class dismissed.